The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience presented by DraftKings 2021 NFL new coaches and coordinators and the fantasy impact that they may have on the new offenses that they are at the helm of, how that's going to impact your fantasy leagues this year. Remember to smash the like button for the video. In the comment section, you tell me which coordinator you're most hyped for to allow for your fantasy players to actually be good this year if they were stuck under some absolute jabroni coordinator the past few years with a slow pace who just wants to run the ball on all three downs. Now they have a new coordinator and things might actually open up. So who are you most pumped for? Who will make the biggest impact on fantasy as at the helm of their new team this year? Remember to subscribe to Mayo Media Network, rate, review, and subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast if you just enjoy listening to this stuff on your phone. You don't want to see my ugly face, all right? Also, runthesims.com, the optimizer. It has the game simulations. It has the sports betting product. But if you're just concerned about season-long fantasy and you want to do your own projections, completely free up on runthesims.com right now. If you are concerned about the optimizer for daily fantasy and the simulations for sports betting, runthesims.com/Mayo will get you a discount. So get in on that right now. Runthesims.com. Joining me on the line right now from FTNFantasy.com, it is Derek Brown, who has penned one of these articles for new coordinators and coaches for, have you done every single team yet?
I think I'm somewhere in the 20s, Pat. I mean, I'm getting close. We're not there yet, but inching closer day by day, coming out with one of these daily, Monday through Friday. So I think the series wraps up next Thursday, if I'm not correct off the top of my head.
All right. So, Derek, let's start at the very top alphabetically. That is, Arthur Smith is the new head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. And he replaces Dan Quinn and Raheem, what was it? Oh, yeah, Sideshow Raheem Morris. Totally just spaced on his name. God, I dropped like 3 Simpsons references in the first 2 minutes of the show. We're off to a hot start, Debo. How is this going to affect things? Because we looked at the efficiency of the Tennessee offense with Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator, how he rejuvenated Ryan Tannehill, but I do recall them running on first down on every single series. Now, maybe it's because they had Derrick Henry, but that's not what we want to see in Atlanta.
So I think with Arthur Smith, the big thing for this offense that's going to help a lot is the play action rates. They're going to go up. And the last time we saw a really good Matt Ryan, which, I mean, Matt Ryan, there's shades of how good you want to say is good. But when we saw Matt Ryan excel during the Shanahan era there, extremely high play action rates. I think it's going to help Matt Ryan in terms of his efficiency and whatever he has left in the tank. For this offense, I mean, I don't know how high the passing rate's going to be. I mean, everybody's out there talking about, okay, we should be buying into Ridley, Kyle Pitts, like all these different players, and I'm not pushing back against that. But you're talking about with Tennessee and the high rushing rates. I think the rushing rates could be a little bit higher than a lot of people want to see, considering if you're buying Atlanta's passing attack. Now, are they going to be top 5? Probably not, but I think somewhere league average is probably about right. I think the pace is also going to pick up here, Pat. I mean, last year Atlanta wasn't blazing trails, but Arthur Smith, even though it was a run-first offense in Tennessee, top 10 in pace across the board, regardless of script, total pace, whatever you want to look at. It was good things. So I think there's a lot of to chew on here for Atlanta and a lot of good things that we can forecast, at least for the Falcons, regarding this system.
So are we thinking that Arthur Smith is just going to implement his offense? I assume that's going to be the case because that's why he was hired as the head coach. Do you find it hard to differentiate between the scheming styles and projecting forward between a head coach and a new offensive coordinator in this situation? Or is this just going to be Smith's offense and then the offensive coordinator replacing Dirk Cutter is just going to be like, yeah, I'm going to implement that?
I think every team's a little bit differently. Like with some of these more offensive-minded head coaches, I lean a little bit towards them and kind of looking through their history, what they've done with personnel and things of that nature. Like everybody's talking about, okay, well, Arthur Smith's going to run a lot of 12. Okay, that's what he did in Tennessee. I think that the personnel is going to lend itself that, yes, he does that. But is he a head coach that is really more like, okay, square peg, round hole, let's just try to force my system? Considering all the things on paper, his pace, play action, what he's done with the players that he's been given when he was in Tennessee, I think that he's more readily available to adjust his system versus some other coaches that we've seen are not necessarily willing to do that regardless of where they go and the team that they're on.
Do we think that it was because of Derrick Henry that we saw a lot of this first down rushing rate and a complete lack of passing to the running backs, because that's just not how they wanted to utilize him? So we see Mike Davis in Atlanta right now, and as we are speaking, he is still what appears to be the full-time starter for the Falcons. Do you envision him getting 20 touches a game? Whether, like, is it just going to be rushing, or will they utilize Mike Davis's pass catching ability a little bit more than they did with Derrick Henry and show a few more different looks than maybe we saw with Tennessee, where it was Henry up the middle, or essentially it's like slants and bombs down the field? And I just don't necessarily think that's how the Falcons offense is probably geared to run. I think that utilizing Davis a bit more, where maybe he's not getting 20 carries a game, but he's getting like 12 carries a game, but he might also see 5 targets out of the backfield. Maybe that's wishful thinking for someone who thinks that Mike Davis could be a really good an impact fantasy player at his current price tag, not like a top 10 guy or anything like that. But if they do utilize him that way, that'd be great for fantasy.
I agree. I mean, I see a lot of the same things for Mike Davis. I don't think that he's going to be a Derrick Henry type where he's getting 20, 25 rushes per game. I think that we could see some of these other backs like worked in here. Now, he's still going to be the primary and the obvious primary, but I agree with you. I think that 12 to 15 touches per game on the ground is more, it's closer to what I envision for this offense, because they're set up like Derrick Henry is a unicorn. Like, he is one of a kind in the NFL. Size, speed, being able to hold up to that type of workload. Mike Davis is 28. We've never seen him hold up to a substantial workload over, now we're talking about 17 games. So I think that Arthur Smith, again, I'm giving him a lot of credence and saying there is more rationality to this coaching than other places. I think that the workload is going to be good for Mike Davis, and I think we're going to see more targets than Derrick Henry ever saw, because Mike Davis has shown he can catch passes. Derrick Henry has never shown us that, and Tennessee showed us over multiple seasons, regardless of his breakaway ability on the ground, they were not going to do that. So, I mean, eventually you have to look at that type of signal and say, okay, well, as much as we want that in fantasy, it's just not going to be. So I think Davis is going to catch more passes than Henry ever did.
The Detroit Lions have taken a true alpha as their head coach with Tarzan Dan Campbell, but they've also brought in the awful Anthony Lynn to be their offensive coordinator. They have a new quarterback. All of their best players are now gone, except for TJ Hawkinson, who is still there. Being a former tight ends coach, you'd think that Dan Campbell would try to at least implement a very tight end heavy offense, try to look out for his guys. But what can we expect from Anthony Lynn? Because I'm doing a series a little bit later on, probably in a week or two, about the no buzz players, about like distressed assets. And it feels like DeAndre Swift has fallen into that right now. But it just seems like Dan Campbell wants to play football like it's 1971, which leads me to believe they're going to run the ball a ton, because Anthony Lynn wants to do that.
I think they're going to run it, and they're going to lean on their running backs a lot in this offense. Now, DeAndre Swift, I think that he has got a really razor-thin set of projections and his outcomes. Like, for him to pay off on top 15 and be the type of player that a lot of people are drafting him to be, and I know reports came out the other day about him being the bell cow and things of that nature. I think DeAndre Swift can be fantastic this year. My worries with DeAndre Swift is, even though Jared Goff is immobile, we didn't see him checking down last year, and Anthony Lynn's scheme has shown, yes, they want to utilize running backs in the passing game, and they're going to run the ball. My worry here is what do they do when they get inside the red zone? Like, we're not projecting this to be a good offense, not a lot of scoring opportunities. So I think Jamal Williams is going to be factoring in here, 1, in the passing game, and 2, in the red zone, more than a lot of people want to see. Although I do see the range of outcomes for DeAndre Swift to pay off. It's just a little bit riskier than I think a lot of people are saying. But I think this is going to be an offense that runs through their running backs. Wow, that's a wonderful phrase. But Anthony Lynn has shown that, like, he's willing to make them the engine, because what do they have for wide receivers, Pat? Like, we're talking about Brashad Perriman, Tyrell Williams. I heard, like, some people talking about them. Oh, they might be a value. And I'm like, to who? Would Jared Goff, a quarterback that's not willing, that's like showing you he's allergic to throwing outside the numbers? He's scared to do it. His ADOT's dropped in each of the last 3 seasons. Like, these wide receivers are not going to be massive factors in this offense, regardless of how Lynn runs it. And the quarterback situation.
I'm just thinking about it right now. So I'm on Run the Sims. I've done my projections. And like I said, anyone out there can sign up for a free membership at runthesims.com. If they just want to fuck around with the projections and create their own cheat sheets, that doesn't cost anything. You can do that for free up on the site right now. So check out runthesims.com. But the way that I have it allocated right now, so I have the Lions running just over 1,000 plays this season in 17 games, which is on sort of the low end of the spectrum in terms of offenses, despite the fact that they're probably going to have the ball a lot because their defense will be giving up a ton of points. Maybe not. Maybe their defense is actually improved for once. We'll see. The offensive line's not bad. I had them at a 47% rushing rate, which I think is the highest of any team besides San Francisco, in my projections at least. That translates to 36 touchdowns and around a 42% rushing touchdown rate. So there's not a lot of touchdowns to go around. Now, this is what I found really interesting once I punched in what I thought the good allocation for target share and rushing share was in this offense. Because, I have Goff at 11% of the rushes. Maybe that's a bit high, but I just want to put that baseline in there to see what would happen. So I have Swift at 46% of the rushing share of this team. Does that sound about right?
It sounds about right. I mean, considering the splits that we've seen over previous Anthony Lynn offenses, Eckler versus the other early down running backs last year and prior iterations with Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon, even if you go all the way back to Buffalo and the two-back system he ran there, it sounds about right. I mean, I think that you're looking at about a 50-50 split. Maybe that leans more towards Jamal Williams if he shows that he can be effective behind a really good offensive line.
So I have Swift at 46 and Jamal Williams at 38% in terms of rushing share. In terms of passing share, I have Swift at a 12% clip of the targets with Jamal Williams at 7%. Now, the biggest shift that I put in here was that Swift I have given 63% of the rushing touchdowns to, where I only have Jamal Williams at 23%. That inverts itself, and then all of a sudden we got a real problem with DeAndre Swift's fantasy value. But that's a pretty decent baseline, I think. A 46% rushing share, a market share of 12% of the targets. That would make him running back 12 for the year in half-point PPR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the small divide that I have on it is I think it could be closer to a 50-50 regarding the rushing touchdowns. Like, I think that Jamal Williams, at least what we saw with Anthony Lynn, I mean, 9 healthy games for Austin Eckler last year. If we're talking about Swift gets the Eckler role in this offense, then in those 9 games, we saw Eckler at 18 red zone rushing attempts versus you saw Joshua Kelly, Kalen Ballage, who are not blowing the socks off of anybody as far as talents. So if anybody wants to talk about, Jamal Williams is just a guy, well, these other guys are not great either. They had 22 red zone rushing attempts combined. So I think it's going to be a little bit closer to a split, and that's where my worry for DeAndre Swift and why I think his upside is a little bit more razor thin. Like, I think the pass game work is sewed in, but I don't think that, at least I think the touchdowns could sway a little bit more towards Williams.
Yeah, well, if we do that and just say we change the projection, the only thing that we say is that we drop down DeAndre Swift from 63% touchdown rate to, let's call it a 25% rushing touchdown rate. Like, things go not great for him in this circumstance. It makes him running back 20 all of a sudden. So it is a razor-thin margin if everything else equals itself out. So I'm a bit worried about him in terms of where he's going in fantasy drafts. Like, there are receivers that I like a little bit after him. Like, J.K. Dobbins is just below him. I kind of have those two bunched together, but they're going at picks number 26 and number 27 in drafts in the past week. But then you have, like, Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Allen Robinson, all, like, directly after those two. I'd rather have all of those receivers.
And that's been my biggest problem with DeAndre Swift. Like, I see it as being razor thin. And if I'm trying to basically walk the line and tether this razor thin projection with DeAndre Swift and say, okay, if everything works out and what I kind of see in my mind's eye, but what about Jamal Williams versus, these are lock, set, forget wide receivers that are going to see 140, maybe 150 targets this year. 130 is like the floor, 125. Like, that type of volume that I know is projectable, and these guys could get 25% target shares versus a guy like, does it work out? Does it not? Is it, the overall offense is not great. I'm pushing the button on wide receivers in that range easily over DeAndre Swift. And that's the problem where, like, I'm a little bit lighter than a lot of other people doing best ball drafts right now with DeAndre
Derek,
Swift.
you said the word that we don't care about on this show, best ball. Just throw that out. We're talking about real fantasy here. Oh, I did 150 drafts. I own everybody. Look how smart I am. Give me a break.
Well, I can honestly tell you, if everybody's out there with 150 teams, my exposure to DeAndre Swift is going to be really, really minuscule. So just put that in for context as well.
All right. Jacksonville. Urban Meyer comes in to replace Doug Marrone. Darren Bevel is the new offensive coordinator, replacing Jay Gruden. They also have a brand new quarterback with the number 1 pick in the draft, a brand new running back to at least split time, or maybe somehow work as like a slot receiver with Travis Etienne, and James Robinson returning off his fantastic rookie season. We'll see what his workload is going to be. But I think the biggest impact here, and I mean, your co-host of Fade the Chalk, Adam Pfeiffer, is a big Marvin Jones guy, and with Bevel coming from Detroit and bringing essentially Marvin Jones with him, I still think that Marvin Jones is probably on pace to be the number 1 fantasy wide receiver on this team.
I don't think that he easily could be, put it that way. Like, I'm not going to push back against you on that one. The way that I see Jacksonville possibly working out this year in terms of target shares, I think the way that we're viewing Cincinnati in a lot of different aspects, like there's 3 really good wide receivers. All of them could get anywhere between 19 to 22% of the targets. And really, then we're talking about touchdown variance and who's going to be the best guy. I think Jacksonville could work out in a similar fashion. If not, I mean, if they run, they're not going to run a lot of 12 because they don't have the tight ends and no Tim Tebow. I don't even know if he makes it out of camp. So I don't see them as running a lot of 2 wide receiver sets unless they run a lot of 21 personnel and get both these backs on the field at the same time. But I think that these wide receivers, I think Marvin Jones could be the guy that leads the team. He's got a history with this offensive system. We know he's not coming off the field if they go 2 wide receivers and 21 personnel and get the backs involved even more. Heck, he's not going to play in the slot. Like, that's probably Visca's role. And so Chark, Marvin Jones, I mean, why don't we just take the discount on Marvin Jones on a guy that I'm with you. I don't think that he's washed. I don't think he's passed, even though he's not young. He played well last year when he was asked to be the number 1 in Detroit. He's going in the 110s to 120s range. Like, he's like 2 to 3 rounds, maybe even more in a lot of like other casual leagues after Laviska Shenault, after DJ Chark. Marvin Jones could be the best value out of this wide receiver core.
Yeah, right now I have them all projected fairly similarly because I haven't gone in and done my manual adjustments. But I think the big thing that I'm looking at right now, like I have them all essentially an 18 to 20% target share between the 3 of them. And I think that Chenault's just overrated to begin with because people who write about fantasy really like him. But nothing would, besides like Twitter clips of him stiff-arming people like twice a season, I don't really know what he's actually done versus Marvin Jones, who I've seen be pretty damn good for the past 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, I like Laviska. The problem is that his ADP is creeping up and up and up. I mean, because of a lot of it, like we're all out in the streets talking about him. But I mean, I think there's a path to him being the number 1 guy. Now, is that, again, we're talking about what does that really mean? Like, does he get a 22% target share versus 21 for the other 2 wide receivers? Is it still we're just splitting hairs? If you look at a lot of other metrics like yards per route run versus via the slot last year, he was really, really stinking good. And we've seen Urban Meyer run a lot of his offense. Now, I'm not going to go with the easy, low-hanging fruit that everybody picks in Curtis Samuel, but in his final year at Ohio State, he ran his passing offense through the slot with Paris Campbell. Now, are Laviska Shenault and Paris Campbell like the same player? No. But this could be an offense that we see him utilize the slot, but am I willing to take him at his ADP in a lot of different aspects over DJ Chark or Marvin Jones, who some of the early reports in camp, I mean, Chark was slipping in drafts. He's still going. I mean, I think the ADP in a lot of different formats is flipped. I think Laviska Shenault's going to go ahead of DJ Chark and Marvin Jones, and I'm probably just going to take the discounts at this point.
Chark currently going at pick number 78 overall, Shenault at 87, Marvin Jones 134. But everything you just described about Urban Meyer running like through the slot, isn't that the primary reason to draft not Laviska Shenault, but Travis Etienne?
Yeah, I mean, it's the viability that you're looking at for Etienne. I mean, Etienne, I think that some of, like, if we're looking at parallels and in very, very different systems, but him and DeAndre Swift are a really interesting side-by-side as far as, like, skill sets, what we're expecting out of this year. There's other backs that could really cannibalize the red zone rushing roles. And And again, Etienne is falling in a similar range to DeAndre Swift. Now he's going after Swift, sometimes around maybe a little bit more than that. But he's again in a range where it's like, I mean, James Robinson, I don't think goes away. I do think, unfortunately, we're going to see some Carlos Hyde this year because it's Urban Meyer, and that's probably just going to be the case. So I think Etienne, we are going to see a lot of slot usage. The problem that I have, even though, yes, he's going to get a lot of targets, is does he get the touchdowns?
Well,
and that's where I'm squinting and wondering.
Let's frame it this way. I'm not super excited about drafting Travis Etienne, which I still pronounce with a French accent, by the way, as it should be pronounced because he's from Louisiana, so that would only actually make a lot of sense instead of, it's like when Americans say foyer instead of foyer, and it just like drives me up the wall. It's one of the...
pecan.
What's that?
Or pecan.
Yeah, or what's the other one? Croissant is another really good one too. When I lived in New Jersey,
as a Louisiana native, I can understand all this pain that you're describing here.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's not like I come from a Francais culture, but je parle français. I am Canadian. Like I at least hear this stuff over and over and over. Like it's just like, oh my god. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me. But I'll put that aside. I don't necessarily want to draft him pick number 40. I think that's too high. My main point was Shenault is getting all this buzz. Oh, Shenault is going to be all that great. But the role that Shenault played last year in Jacksonville's system, they're projecting forward to this year. Like, oh, he's going to run the slot. He's going to get carries out of the backfield. They just drafted a fucking guy in the first round to do all this stuff. Why would Shenault still do it?
Agreed. And I think it's part of the risk that's not really being baked in right now. I think it's everybody's like, okay, he's size, speed, specimen. He's freaking amazing. And I'm not trying to throw a ton of cold water on Laviska Shenault, but what you're laying out here and him getting slot work, like they're not running 10 personnel, Pat. Like they're not running 2 slots out there. Like that's probably not going to be the case at all in Jacksonville. So if Etienne's lining up in the slot, where's Visca? Well, he's probably on the sideline because I don't think he's still an outside work over DJ Chark. I don't think he's still an outside work over Marvin Jones. And we haven't seen Laviska Shenault like in that type of role where he can win outside and do it consistently enough where we say, like, even if he gets put out there, then he's definitely going to succeed in doing it.
The Chargers have a brand new coach. So you have to think that's an upgrade, just getting rid of Anthony Lynn right off the hop. And there's also no, what was the guy's name? Shane
Steichen.
Yeah, that's right. He was the guy who got promoted like mid-season 2 years ago, and they just kept him for whatever reason. Now we got Brandon Staley, a friend of McVay's ugliest friend by far. So, but he also comes from the defensive side of the ball, but I'm pretty sure he was an ex-quarterback, which is like, okay, that's kind of strange. So do we see a McVay-style offense, or at least the up-tempo, lots of passing style offense, or does this go more towards like a Saints offense? Because Joe Lombardi, the quarterback's coach from New Orleans, is now in Los Angeles for the Chargers. And he was previously the offensive coordinator for the Lions in 2014 and 2015. I think he got replaced by Jim Bob Cooter. Remember when he was like all the rage when Stafford was good for like 6 weeks? It was like, oh my God, Jim Bob Cooter, here we go. And just everyone enjoyed saying his name so much. I think he got maybe slightly overrated in that sense. But what do you see this Chargers offense looking like this year, especially with Herbert in year 2, versus what we saw last year, where it was a lot of, well, we're on the 3-yard line, like you said, bring in Kalen Ballage. Like, I don't think we're going to see that again.
I don't think we're going to see that again. I'm a little bit lower on the Chargers than some other people, only because I think, like, with Shane Steichen out of town, I think that he had a decent amount to do with the offense. Yes, I know Anthony Lynn was there, but we saw the Chargers up in pace last year. Passing rates weren't amazing. But with Joe Lombardi, I went all the way back to his Detroit time because all of the Saints stuff the water gets muddy. Like we're talking about previously, it's like if you're looking at projecting how these offenses run and okay, everybody's like, oh, he's coming for the Saints system. Well, he's a quarterback's coach. Like, he had 2 5-year stints as the quarterback's coach in New Orleans. I mean, we all kind of agree, like, okay, well, Sean Payton is probably the one pulling the strings there. Pete Carmichael is probably the guy in his ear. The quarterback coach is just standing over there, like, you know, tossing on the sideline with Jameis Winston and trying to catch the errant passes on a weekly basis. I think that Lombardi, there could be some good things here. I think the passing rate could go up. Because if you look at Detroit when he was there, especially if we're projecting the Chargers this year, I think that the passing rate could get into the low 60s, which would put them top 5, top 7. I think the pace could drop here, though. With Joe Lombardi going all the way back to Detroit again, I mean, we saw like it was a talented offense. Yes, he got replaced by Jim Bob Cooter, and Lord, that era of coordinators. I mean, we had the Jim Bob Cooters, we had Ben McAdoo's of the world who were just like dump off and throw it short. I think Lombardi, it could be good things for the passing volume. I think the pace drops for this offense. I'm not really willing to push like a panic button with them, but I think I'm a little bit lower than consensus versus a lot of the people are like, oh my God, like Justin Herbert. Whoa, let's go. I think the offense could be good, but this is still an offense that's really condensed, and that they do have. I'm not saying that Keenan Allen is, we need to put him out to pasture, but it's really thin as far as the passing game options here. We got Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, and then a prehistoric Jared Cook. If any one of these dominoes falls, like if Keenan Allen were to go down, the Chargers are going to be, I mean, it's not going to look as pretty. So I'm not trying to like project forward injuries, but just looking at range of outcomes for this offense, I do find myself a little bit lower than consensus than a lot of the people and how they project it.
So you have very little faith in Jalen Guyton or Josh Palmer coming in to back up either. I mean, Mike Williams is going to go down at some point. So if Keenan goes down at the same time, they're in trouble. But if Jared Cook gets hurt, that means Parham's going to play, which just could be better for everyone.
That could be better for everyone. And yeah, I mean, Jalen Guyton is he's the Los Angeles version of Demarcus Robinson. They're just both out there running routes and Fitbitting on a weekly basis. Not earning any targets, not getting open, but Lord, do they run routes and play snaps, man.
So yeah, if Lombardi was truly going to bring over a part of the Saints offense, they'd have some sort of weird thing where Justin Herbert would exit the field on the 9-yard line and the Easton Stick would come into the game for no reason. So that's probably not going to happen.
And then Easton Stick runs out and he plays seam tight end, and we see, oh gosh, that's a horrible range of outcomes. I don't even want to envision it.
Yeah, so I think you're probably right. But I mean, that could spell good news for Austin Eckler, because I think that those were the Theo Riddick years, weren't they? When Lombardi was in Detroit?
So when Lombardi was in Detroit, the first year they had Joique Bell was the primary. I'm blanking on the name of the backup there. But the 2015 year, that was the year of all the Amir Abdullah hype.
Oh man,
so,
hold on, was that the Javid Best year before he had the concussion?
It was, I think it was towards the tail end. I think 2014 was that, and then 2015 was Amir Abdullah and Joique in Detroit, which that year, and that's one of the reasons I think that I can envision a little bit of a goal line role or more for Austin Eckler. They gave some goal line work to Amir Abdullah, he's not any bigger than Austin Eckler. So I think we could see a few. I'm not saying he's going to be the primary goal line back, but I think we could see a little bit more work inside the 10, inside the 20 for Austin Eckler this year.
Yeah, and we had a lot of checkdowns. That Theo Riddick was there that year. Theo Riddick had 80 receptions that year on 99 targets. Amir Abdullah had 25 catches, and Joique Bell had 22 catches. So a lot of passing to the running back.
Agreed. Yeah, it was a large target share to the running back that year, and that's why, like, I think that Austin Eckler, the floor is extremely high, like, and with his passing game role, and I think that they're, like, we're talking about, like, if we're comparing apples to apples, I'm like, okay, DeAndre Swift's his line of projections and paying off at his ADP is razor thin. I think that Austin Eckler's is wider. I think that his ability to both capture a higher ceiling than where he's going in drafts and the floor is immensely high. Like, I think he's being drafted around probably where his floor is, and maybe the ceiling is a little bit higher, like RB7, RB6, if all these things work out.
The New York Jets have a new coach, which is probably just great news for them. Robert Saleh, defensive mind, comes in. The offensive coordinator is... It's Matt LaFleur's brother, Mike LaFleur, who was the passing game coordinator for the 49ers last year. I don't know if that necessarily means that, hey, he is a disciple of Kyle Shanahan. So does that mean we're going to see more of a run-heavy offense, even with a new quarterback and 80,000 receivers on the Jets now?
So that's how I'm projecting New York. I think they're going to be extremely run-heavy. And the other thing about it is, like, look, New York's defense is not going to be good. Their defensive line should be really good against the run. I think they'll be able to rush the passer with Carl Lawson in town. Their secondary is going to be god-awful. So I really think New York is going to run the ball. I think that, again, you're talking about pretty boy Zach Wilson in town. They're going to try to protect him and ease him in, and they really should, because if you're looking at, one, how this offense could run, and two, this offensive line, this offensive line is set up really, really well to run block extremely well. Like they've got Mekhi Becton, Elijah Vera Tucker. They brought in Morgan Moses. The other pieces they have left over, I have quietly graded out extremely well, Pat, in zone run blocking grade. So as bad as his defense is, and even with the pass game weapons, like they brought in Elijah Moore, and he's been the talk of all training camp right now. Like he's gotten a buzz. I mean, can we say like maybe the most out of any player we've heard all off season?
Yes and no. Hold on. Yeah, it's yes and no, but it's mainly because there are so many people at like you hear the most about the Jets and Giants just because that's where reporters live. So you're hearing a ton about that. Here's the thing about Moore though. Like there's a guy who's already on the team who plays his position and starts. Like that's a problem.
Yes, it's a problem. I mean, I like Elijah Moore, and I think that he is going to be a good pro. I mean, his entire prospect profile was great, but I still think this is going to be a run-first team. And I think that's how they're going to compensate for, one, protecting Zach Wilson, and two, trying to cover up for their terrible defense. And I think they're going to run the ball. I mean, that's why I've been discussing like why I like Michael Carter and where he's going, even though, yes, he was a fourth-round pick, but he fits this offense extremely well. And the Jets run like their running schedule. Last time I looked at it in projected win totals and looking at last year's defense, they looked like on paper like they were going to have a top 10 run schedule. As far as like if they want to run the ball, they should have the ability to behind what I think is going to be a sneaky good offensive line to do so.
The issue is it's tough to run the ball when you're down by 30 points after a quarter.
Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. That's the problem. But if we think that their rushing rates could be top 5, top 7 in neutral scripts, if they even want to run the ball a ton, even when they are down. Now, is that a great scenario and probably still highly likely? No, it's not as much. But I think that if for a team that's going to try to play keep away and protect at least what is going to still be a terrible defense, I think they're going to run the ball more than some people are envisioning, considering all we've heard is, okay, well, Zach Wilson, and okay, well, Elijah Moore, and oh, well, they signed Corey Davis.
Well, it should at least go up from here. They were 29th in offensive pace last year. They were 32nd in points per game, so it can't get worse. So that's good news if you're drafting Jets players. I don't have a whole lot of interest. Maybe Zach Wilson in 2 quarterback leagues, just because he might start to run, and he just might be the guy that you want. He could be like almost like having that Blake Bortles type year from not the year that they were good, the year before that, when they kept getting down by like 40 points. Then all of a sudden, like Blake Bortles' fourth quarters would be filled with 30 fantasy points. That could be like Zach Wilson this year. The Eagles have a new head coach. Doug Peterson is out. Nick Sirianni is in. Your boy, whose name I continue not to be able to pronounce, from the Chargers, is now the offensive coordinator, replacing no one because they didn't have an offensive coordinator last year. It's funny that they let Frank Reich go only to keep Doug Peterson. I guess he was just coming off a Super Bowl, so they couldn't get rid of him. But they should have just kept Frank Reich and promoted him, because now they went and got his offensive coordinator. Do you see any particular stylistic difference for the Eagles this year, or with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, that it's going to be a lot of weird runs, a lot of like backyard type football type plays like we saw last year? Or is it going to have a bit more fluidity now?
I think it's going to be a lot better and more improved offense and an offensive system. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit higher. I'm a lot of bit higher on Jalen Hurts than a lot of people, is because what you saw at Philly last year was totally broken. I mean, we all know that. I mean, you're running out, you've benched Travis Fulgham, you're running out the corpse of Alshon Jeffrey. He's basically running in circles out of all quarterbacks with 100 or more dropbacks. His ADOT was only behind freaking Joe Flacco. I think this offensive system is going to be, and we heard some rumors about this yesterday, it's building it around Jalen Hurts. And I think that's good. And if you look at Hurts as a passer in college, we're going to have more short and intermediate throws. He's not going to be asked to throw it deep as often as he was last year. And I think that if you look at Sirianni and Steiche's systems, I think we're looking at probably like a 58% passing rate, which is going to be somewhere middle of the league, probably 15th to 17th in the league. And that could be higher than some people are projecting, because, oh yeah, well, Jalen Hurts is going to run. But I don't think that he's going to run like in the sense of like, okay, well, Tyrod Taylor, Lamar Jackson, like, I think we're looking at a little bit higher passing rates than the 50 to 52% that we saw in those types of offenses. So I think the passing volume could surprise some people here. I think the pace actually, because Sirianni has run fast offenses. Like, and no, Jalen Hurts is not Andrew Luck, but they did run fast with Andrew Luck. Shane Steichen ran fast with Justin Herbert. I think at the minimum, the Eagles are probably going to be somewhere in the 15 to 17 range on pace. But I think this has the opportunity to surprise people, one, in the passing rate, because I think they're underrating how high that could be, one, because of the offensive system, and two, because the defense is still terrible. Like, the defensive line is good. They're going to be able to stop the run, but their secondary is bad. Now, they got a massive upgrade with Steven Nelson and signing him, but Darius Slay is still not good. The nickel corner is still not good, and the back end behind them is still not great at all. So I think Philly is going to be forced, and like we're talking about with the Jets, they're going to be in a lot of negative game scripts. So I think they're going to pass the ball more, and the pace could surprise people as well.
The Texans have a new head coach, and anytime that you can go hire the wide receivers and passing game coordinator from the Baltimore Ravens the past 2 years, you got to do it, because they have explosive passing offenses and a depth at receiver that is almost unmatched, is how I would call the Baltimore Ravens the past 2 years. But there is something a bit interesting here with David Culley, because obviously Deshaun Watson isn't going to be playing, and that's becoming more and more apparent. Whether he plays at all, it's not going to be on the Houston Texans. But Tyrod is likely going to be the quarterback, at least to start the season. That the offense with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore was very efficient, at least very fantasy-friendly for him. Are we kind of sleeping on Tyrod as a fantasy option this year if he wins this job and they kind of gear an offense to resemble what Baltimore's looked like? Or are they just so bad that it doesn't matter?
I think it's going to be bad, but I do think that we're sleeping on some of the pass game options here, because they did keep the offensive coordinator in Tim Kelly, who, after O'Brien said, okay, fine, I made a ton of terrible decisions. You call the plays, you do these things. We saw a Texans team that was top 5 in passing rate last year. Now, the pace is probably going to be somewhere around league average, but even with Tyrod, we know this team is going to suck, Pat, and their offensive line is going to be bad. They're going to have to throw the ball. And I'm not saying they're going to throw a ball a ton, but I think that we are sleeping on a lot of the passing game options here, even with Tyrod under center, because all these guys are, they're basically free. And yes, that's baked into because the Texans are bad. But Brandon Cooks, who's competing with him for targets? Nico Collins is showing out in camp, and then goes down with Cooks. He's getting targets on a weekly basis. And Jordan Akins, who is there Brevin Jordan, the rookie tight end, to compete with him for targets? He could easily walk into 80, 90 targets this season and be a guy that is it beautiful? Are you having to hold your nose probably when you press draft at the end of your tight end premium leagues? Yes. But we covet volume, and I think that there are going to be sources of that in this Texans passing game.
Yeah, I think Nico Collins is just going to do it for me. He's going undrafted in fantasy leagues, essentially. That's probably as much of a gamble as I want to take. Maybe Brennan Cooks if he continues to slip, because he is now just a distressed asset, but he is very clearly far and away the best receiver on this team, that if he can just not get concussed or pull his hamstring, then he's in line for like 150 targets.
He got a 28% target share without Will Fuller on the field last year. So I think even if we bump that down, even in the lower range of options, like 24, 25%, even if you're like, okay, well, Houston's got Tyrod, they're not going to throw a ton. That's still, the guy's going to walk into 110, 120 targets. Where he's going in drafts, it's a pretty nice price to pay.
Yeah, that's not terrible. Like, I have Brendan Cooks at 21%. Let's bump him up to 25 to see what he might be doing right here and see what that puts his projection in at, because I'm just very curious to see what Brendan Cooks is looking like now. Brendan, too many Cooks. We're looking at 91 catches on 149 targets. If he has a 25% market share of the targets in this offense, which is pretty feasible, I think, for him. That would put him at wide receiver number 20 for the year. And I don't know what Tyrod's like now. All we can really remember from him is getting stabbed in the lung and causing Justin Herbert to start last year for the Chargers. But when he was with the Bills, and even a little bit with the Browns, not a bad deep ball. People forget that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his deep ball rates weren't bad at all. His completion percentages, I think that it's just we haven't seen him on the field in a while. And the last time we saw him in Cleveland, he wasn't great. But I mean, we do need to give some context. That was the Hugh Jackson era. So we got to, I'm not saying give the guy a pass, but it's pretty bad, man. Like, so I think that we're chasing volume. I mean, even if it's not 25%, so Brandon Cooks, we're looking at the very end of, not the very end, but like, I mean, towards like the 10th round, Pat. I mean, considering where's he going in the latest ADP? Because it's not high. And for 120 targets, we're talking about the floor and the ceiling could be higher. It's a nice buying point.
Brennan Cook's pick number 92 on average. That's a good buying spot, but that's not where people like, because everyone's drafting, everyone at least that I listen to, like friends of mine that come on the show, are all drafting exactly the same way. So I'll take my stud running back or stud tight end in the first 2 rounds, and it's receiver for the next 8 rounds. And then by the time it gets like to the Cooks level, it's like we're back at running back, or Cooks is already gone. But he is one of these distressed assets that no one really wants to touch. So, I mean, I always find that whatever the prevailing strategy is in fantasy football, you're going to have more success bucking that trend and just doing the opposite. That's how it worked for years when everyone, like the reason that 0 RB became so widely used amongst really good fantasy football players is because for years it was, you might even take 3 running backs with your first 3 picks. It's like, all right, well, I'll just take the 3 best receivers in the league and they'll be on my team. And then I'll figure out some backups and pick up these mid-tier guys. And that strategy was super effective for like 6 years. But then everyone adopted that strategy. So actually doing the opposite worked. And now everyone's back to doing some sort of hybrid of the opposite again. So just reverse that and you're probably going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of drafts, I mean, like you're talking about, I mean, wide receivers ADPs have been pushed up a ton. And I think people are, okay, well, how do I buck the trend of wide receivers going even higher and higher and higher and higher? And I'm like, okay, I mean, you could go anchor RB and that's fine. And then you're just chasing wide receivers. You can go 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds and you're still making your bets that if they stay healthy, I think it's fine. But to your point about 0 RB, yeah, we know the fragility of the position and stuff like that. There are other years, I mean, we don't have to go too far back where we saw wide receiver Armageddon, where like wide receivers were also, and I'm not saying like that is definitively, and if you look over multiple years, do they have the same injury rates as running backs? Well, no. But can we say like they all play a very physical demanding game? And wide receivers can get hurt just as easily as running backs, considering.
The other thing that I was thinking about, and like I know I said don't mention best ball, but I'm gonna mention is that I think that the ADPs in best ball, like no matter where you play, like if you're looking on DraftKings and seeing those ADPs, I don't think that's going to translate to season long, which way more people play, despite the fact that Twitter would lead you to believe that that is not true. But far more people play their 1 season long fantasy league. And I would think that that probably jibes a bit more with what you see in high stakes leagues in terms of ADP rather than best ball. I think people are more conventional when they draft their season long leagues, that this for example, like I don't know where they're going in best ball right now, but I was talking about Allen Robinson when I had Ray on last week. And Allen Robinson's ADP right now is 32 overall in high stakes leagues. I'm guessing it's higher than that in best ball.
He's somewhere in that 30 range. Like you could usually get Allen Robinson in the 3rd round, at least the drafts that I've done recently. Because I think there's a lot of other wide receivers that have been pushed up around him, or the tight ends kind of make it into that range. But I'm usually able to, like, I've been a few slow drafts and I've done some fast drafts over the last 2 days where I've been able to get Allen Robinson in the 30s.
Okay. So maybe it's not all that different. It just feels like this overwhelming wide receiver strategy from rounds 3 to 7. I don't necessarily think that's going to translate as much to season-long leagues. So you're going to see those wide receivers fall back down. Yeah.
No, I agree with you on that one. I mean, I think that there's a lot more casual players out there, and I think there's a lot of people that still play fantasy football that it's like, okay, I'm going to go running back, and then I'm going to look at wide receivers. I'm going to go tight end, running back, or tight end, running back. I think that there are still a lot of people that still do those strategies. Now, are they playing best ball? Are they playing in these high stakes?
They are absolutely not what they're doing. Like, and the thing is that the players that you're talking about, my audience, by and large, are like 9 out of 10 fantasy football players. And for whatever reason, and maybe it's because certain companies are paying other people to talk about their product, but it makes it feel like it's the inverse. But anyone who's doing a fucking fantasy football draft at the end of May is not the regular consumer. They're just not.
No, I don't disagree with you at all. And that's why I think that still going running back at the beginning of these drafts, especially if you're in casual leagues, is definitely viable because you're making the bet that these two running backs pay off, and then the wide receivers, and especially in a lot of your casual leagues, Lord help me, especially, oh God, if they're 10-team, Pat, you could start with like 3 running backs, and the wide receivers you're staring at in a 10-team league are ridiculous. Even in 12-team leagues, if everybody's going to go running backs, where you're at on those running backs in the first 2 rounds, and then you could just smash wide receivers, because there are a lot of wide receivers in those ranges that we could see either break out, have really good seasons, or they're in offenses that we're getting maybe their top 5, top 7 passing rate. So the target share is going to be good or higher than other players at 22% versus, okay, well, this other schmo over here is getting 24%, but it equals out because the other team's going to pass like crazy.
Indianapolis, obviously, we just talked about Philadelphia, has lost its offensive coordinator. They now have, who is there? Oh, Marcus Brady from Ligue Nationale Canadienne, former CFL quarterback Marcus Brady. Do you expect, and obviously Carson Wentz is out for short to long time. No one is really certain for this right now. And maybe the offense, like, what is this? Like, does the offense change, like, their overall scheme? Because at times last year, it really did feel like it wasn't the Andrew Luck offense that we saw. It was the Phillip Rivers offense that we were used to seeing, but with a bit more effective running game. Is that what we're going to see from Indy still?
I think what we're going to see from Indy is going to depend on how long Wentz is out. I mean, it's funny because I'm trying to dive into CFL stats and let you get those.
Don't do that.
It was painful, Pat. Like I'm trying to find, like, you can't find passing rates for these teams. But can you find pass attempts per game? How good is offense? Like, okay, where were they scoring well? His offenses overall look like, okay, on paper, yes, they were good. They were putting up points in 3 of the 5 seasons. I want to say off the top of my head, he was top 5 in points per game in the CFL. And dear God, help me for knowing that. This tells you the depth of what all I've looked at this offseason. But I think that the Colts, Wentz is going to be the key to it. I think that for the time that Wentz is out, regardless, and now we're hearing, okay, Phillip Rivers is like, well, I like coaching, but maybe I come back to the NFL. Not saying that happens, but it's out there in the ether. For as long as Wentz is out, I think that Indy is going to lean on their running game. I think it's going to be very close to what we saw with after the Andrew Luck stuff, and we saw Jacoby Brissett take over, and Indy was top 3, top 6 in neutral and positive script rushing rates. I think they're going to run the ball, and they're going to lean on their defense. Now, when Wentz comes back, I think Reich has enough of this offense, or a lot, should I say, in what has happened with Indy to say that they're probably going to finish somewhere. They're going to be very, very script dependent with Wentz. We saw that with Rivers. Like, he had some weeks where he was like 61, 62% passing rates. If they were behind, if they were ahead, they were going to lean on Jonathan Taylor. I think that overall, this is going to be a very matchup dependent offense. And for as long as Wentz is out, they're going to run the damn ball.
Miami gets rid of Chan Gailey, who seemingly developed a pretty good Ryan Fitzpatrick offense. Not so hot on the old Tua offense. So what they've done is now they have co-offensive coordinators. They promoted their running game coordinator. They promoted their tight ends coach. Now they're dueling offensive coordinators. What would you expect this Miami offense to look like with Tua at the helm? You know, they have 3 receivers who are all sort of injured, but all not injured at the same time. Fuller's going to miss at least a game, but he's already hurt as well. So Lord knows when he's going to be back. We don't really, everyone seems to just be penciling in Myles Gaskin in this backfield to be like the guy, but that could be a combination of like 4 different guys for all we know. What do you expect this Miami offense to do this year, and how do you think it's going to be different?
I think so. The dueling pianos of offensive coordinators is really the biggest interesting thing here, because Eric Studesville is a total, we have no clue. He's a black box affair. Like, we don't know what's going to happen with him and his say in this offense. Now, a former running backs coach, okay, well, he likes the run game. But if we see Godsey, the other guy that's going to be helping call plays, or the primary play caller, depending on what rumors and what things you dive into, Miami could be really good, Pat. Like, as far as from a pace perspective, a passing rate perspective, we saw Godsey in previous iterations in Houston. Now, he had Brock Osweiler as his quarterback. Ooh, dear Lord, help me. That still threw the ball deep, even though Brock was terrible. That still passed the ball, even though Brock was terrible. Now, they were more run-heavy in those years. But if you look at the one of the years, it was either the year prior or the year after Brock. I want to say it was the year after Brock. But Brian Hoyer, who is not a good quarterback either, but when he was under center for the Texans, they were top 10 in pace in every single script. Their passing rates were up there. I think that if we obviously considering what we've seen out of him with bad personnel, I think that Miami could be a team that surprises in pace and in passing rate. I think that all of the moves they made this offseason, and Tua was not great as a passer last year, but if you look at all the different metrics, the one thing that he was actually like passable in, like decent in, was throwing the deep ball. And that makes sense considering all the weapons they added this offseason, like bringing in Will Fuller to complement Devontae Parker, drafting Jalen Waddle. I think this team could run a large amount of, I'm saying large, but they're going to be above the league average in 12 personnel. And I think that this team also could surprise people a lot in pace and passing rate.
Minnesota swaps offensive coordinators. They go from Kubiak to Kubiak. So from Gary to Clint, who spells his name with a K, which is just Clint Kubiak. I mean, now we're dangling on just weird territory with that. But usually I'm very pro Ks. Like if you're Eric, but you're Eric with a K, it's like Mark with a K versus Mark with a C. Very pro K in that circumstance. I don't know about this one. This one's kind of weird when I look at it. Anyway, do we envision any difference between the Kubiaks?
Not at least on paper. I think it's going to be very similar. And the other thing about Minnesota is I think their defense is going to be much improved. I mean, basically last year was a house of horrors. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong for their defense last year went wrong. Like Michael Pierce opted out. Daniel Hunter missed the year. Anthony Barr was limited to 2 games. You had a rookie secondary that struggled. I think that all of the moves they made this offseason, bringing in Dalvin Thompson, you have Pierce back, you have Anthony Barr back. They've addressed cornerback, bringing in Patrick Peterson, who's not top shelf anymore, but I think he can be good enough, and Brashad Breeland. I think that this team, considering the marriage with the defense and Kubiak, I think they're going to run the ball a ton. I don't think they're going to be in as many negative game scripts, so I am worried about the passing rate, and that kind of leaks over. I think Kubiak's going to do a lot of these similar things that his father did, in the sense that the run game is going to be where they live and die by, and especially in positive game scripts, which if I'm expecting Minnesota to be in more of those this year, I think it's going to be a lot of Dalvin Cook. And these pass catchers I'm really worried about, because Justin Jefferson is being drafted as a top 10 wide receiver. He is a fantastic talent, but unless Adam Thielen goes away, even if he gets the targets, if the passing rate goes down, he's going to have a tough time paying off where he's going in drafts, and especially in the red zone, which Thielen still owns the red zone. A lot of the ways that I'm envisioning Kubiak and this entire team overall is I like Dalvin, and because the bar is so low at tight end, I like Irv Smith, and I'm really not finding myself getting a lot of Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, and some of this has to do with Kubiak and just the team in general.
Matt Canada is in as offensive coordinator of the Steelers now. I would envision them running a little bit more, even behind all the talk this offseason, oh my God, look how bad the offensive line is for the Steelers. Like, well, it was really bad last year. That doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be that bad this year. In fact, it's kind of like the Jets offense. It can only get better, really, from this point. It's not going to get worse from what we just saw, saying they have a much better talent-wise running back this time around. So I would expect the pass rate to drop a little bit, but are we really sweating Matt Canada here, or is this just going to be Ben doing whatever he wants?
I think it's going to be Ben still sitting in shotgun. I think that the play action rates could go up a little bit because of what Canada's done at the collegiate level, but Ben has never been a quarterback and he doesn't have the mobility to do a lot of play action. So even if it goes up some, I think it's marginal. I think that the Steelers are still going to throw the ball. And yes, everybody's talking about the offensive line, and dear Lord, the off-season offensive line analysis is basically undefeated. Every single year we fade an offense, so we talk about, they're so terrible. Like last year it was, the Rams can't run the ball because their offensive line is so horrible. And I'm like, okay, sure. And the year before that it was, Arizona can't run the ball because their offensive line is terrible. And then you see David Johnson, when he was healthy, actually running the ball decently well. Or Kenyon Drake running well. So I think we get a little bit out over our skis on offensive line analysis and you're talking about it, Pat, They were bottom of the league last year, like bottom 3 in every single metric. So are they going to get worse than bottom 3? Okay, maybe they're 32nd, but I really don't think so. I think that at worst, it's a push, and this offense is still going to throw the ball because Ben is back there. I think the play action could go up a little bit. I think the run game is going to be better because it's Najee versus James Conner. And I think they're going to scheme up a lot more running back targets. Like last year, they were 32nd in the NFL in target share to the running back. That's going up this year. And part of that reason why I believe that they're going to scheme up more targets to the running back position is why I'm a little bit lower on some of the short area targets in this offense. Like, I like Deontay Johnson. I don't have a problem with him, but Juju was basically a short area tight end last year. Eric Ebron, they brought in a blocker or similar talent to Pat Freiermuth who could play inline and as a receiver. I'm not drafting Eric Ebron this year. I'm not, and honestly, I'm lower on Juju Smith-Schuster because if he gets these short area targets, if Najee's going to be involved in the passing game because of all of the scheme and again, play action, I worry about where his targets or how he's going to pay off on having the similar target share even of last year.
San Francisco did not have an offensive coordinator last year. It was just Kyle Shanahan doing everything. Now they brought in Mike McDaniel from Yale, but it's going to be Kyle Shanahan. Expect nothing different. I don't even think we need to break this one down. That's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be a Kyle Shanahan offense, and it will be maddening when you try to pick who is going to be good in any particular week. The Seahawks, Brian Schottenheimer is finally gone. Does that mean we're going to see some more passing? Gotta be, right?
I think so, Pat. I think the pace is going to surprise people. I think Shane Waldron, and we're talking about McVay type of things. I'm not willing to sit here and put that on Shane Waldron's plate, but we have all the offseason rumbles have been that the pace is going to surprise people. And I think that even if the passing rate doesn't climb a ton, I think even league average versus what we've seen out of this offense previously and the different scheme and route concepts that we've heard also talked about, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett have all been discussing this. They're going to have more yards after the catch opportunities. It's not going to be Russ Wilson running 15 circles and then throw deep or, dear God, just make a play for us. I think the offense is going to be better structured this year. I think the pace is going to help people. And even if the pace, like the passing rate doesn't have to be top 5 in this offense, because if the pace it picks up, you're going to get more passing attempts just because they're going to be running more damn plays. So I like Shane Waldron's addition to Seattle, as well as they got Gerald Everett, who is, I mean, the guy just needs volume on a per touch basis, per catch basis. He's been fantastic in previous seasons. So I like Seattle. I've actually come around to them a lot. And I find myself drafting Russell Wilson more. DK Metcalf is still really expensive, but Tyler Lockett, you can get him at, I mean, depending on where you're at, and a lot of people have been burned by him and the drop-offs in season at times and how his splits work out. I like Tyler Lockett a lot out of this offense.
Yeah, Tyler Lockett going number 47 overall right now. The issue is that I'm all in on Jamar Chase, and he's going number 53 overall. So I'd just rather have Jamar Chase.
And that's fine. I mean, I'm not going to push back. Like, I love Jamar Chase. I think that his addition to the Cincinnati offense is going to be fantastic. They were terrible, Pat. A lot of people put that on Joe Burrow, but when Tyler Boyd and AJ Green are your deep targets, and you're asked to throw deep and you're in a high passing rate offense, that's not a good situation at all. Jamar Chase is going to be a massive upgrade.
The last switching coordinator, we're going to start with where we be or end with where we began, because Arthur Smith, obviously gone from Tennessee. Todd Downing, the former tight ends coach with Tennessee, has now been promoted into that spot. Obviously, a lot of credit went to Arthur Smith with how efficient that the Tennessee offense has run over the past few years, especially since Ryan Tannehill usurped Marcus Mariota and just became this new quarterback all of a sudden. How does this offense look now, and do you think it will remain as efficient?
I have my worries on that. I do give Arthur Smith some credence in how in the things that he's done, because he's used motion, he's used a lot of high play action rates, and those are things that I don't believe come from the mind of Mike Vrabel. So I do put that on Arthur Smith. Now, looking at Todd Downing, the only time we saw him run an NFL offense, it was terrible for the Raiders. Pace wasn't good. Their play action rates were at the bottom of the league. Now, everybody's like, okay, well, he's just going to run a similar system to Arthur Smith. I mean, they could take a lot of similar concepts from what Smith did there, and considering he was in the house whenever all of these things have transpired, and Todd Downing has seen Ryan Tannehill perform extremely well and be super efficient with these concepts. So they could be more integrated than we ever saw with the Raiders and Todd Downing previously, but they also could not be to the level that we saw previously with Tennessee. And again, I was talking about Arthur Smith. Yes, they ran the ball. They rushed the ball a ton, but the pace was good there in all different game environments. And so with Todd Downing, if the pace falls a little bit and the passing rate doesn't pick up, which if you look at how Todd Downing ran the offense previously, I think the passing rate could go up a little bit to compensate for the pace going down. Overall, I do have a lot of fears on, is this offense going to be as efficient as it has been previously? Like, I have a hard time buying into A.J. Brown at his ADP, which hasn't moved a ton since Julio arrived. Julio is still, I mean, he's fine where you're going to get him in drafts, but it's overall an offense that I don't find myself drafting a lot because these guys are all expensive. And a lot of the narrative around it is like, oh, well, you know, I mean, Arthur Smith's gone. Like all those great things that he did are they're gone. Todd Downing he's just going to do the same things and we're going to be totally fine. And that's a little bit more of a difficult pill to swallow. Like to say that in every situation, this other coordinator is going to make the similar play calls and do all of the same things that the previous guy did, who the previous guy was fantastic.
And you do have to remember that Tim Andercust had picked the Indianapolis Colts as his team in the AFC South. But now they've lost all their players, and he has now switched his pick to the Tennessee Titans. So,
Lord, bury him.
And he already said that he's already given Trevor Lawrence a nickname, Trevor Bust Lawrence. So just bet all your money on Jacksonville, and you should be fine, I think.
I was fixing to say Jacksonville sounds like they're going to be top 5 in scoring this year. Let's go.
Yeah. So just draft Trevi, draft Marv. You'll be good to go from that regard. Derek Brown, you have your entire series up at ftnfantasy.com right now. Do you have a promo code that people can use to get a discount on that entire package?
So you can use the promo code for our fantastic podcast, Fade the Chalk. It's FTC. You save 10% on sign up. Yeah, I mean, Pat, this has been awesome. Thank you again for having me. When was the last time we talked, man? I mean, what was it, prior to the NFL draft? We're talking about prospects and how good Rashad Bateman was.
I mean, that hasn't changed. I'm really coming around to Rashad Bateman. No, yes. I think you and I broke down the Julio trade like 10 minutes after.
Oh, yes, that too. Yep.
So
that was fantastic too.
You should go follow Debo on Twitter. Check out all of his work at ftnfantasy.com. You can follow me at The PME. Smash the like on the way out and go get that membership at runthesims.com right now. If you just want the season-long stuff, that's all free. You just go put in your email and boom, you got full access to all the projections. But if you want the optimizer and the game simulator and all the NFL betting tools, there's no picks. It's just tools. So you can do your own research, all completely customizable. Runthesims.com/Mayo to go do that right now. You want more fantasy football content? I suggest you subscribe to Fantasy Football Picks and Bets, a brand new show on Mayo Media Network. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!